Sarah Martinez walked into the crowded cafeteria of Roosevelt High School, clutching her worn backpack tightly against her chest. The buzz of teenage chatter filled the air as students gathered around tables, laughing and sharing stories from their weekend adventures. Sarah scanned the room, looking for an empty spot where she could eat her simple peanut butter sandwich in peace. She had grown accustomed to eating alone. At 17, Sarah had learned to navigate the complex social landscape of high school, while keeping her true identity hidden from everyone around her. Her faded jeans, secondhand sneakers, and plain t-shirts told a story that wasn't entirely true, but it was the story she needed to tell. The Martinez family lived in a modest apartment, on the outskirts of town. At least, that's what everyone at school believed. Sarah's father, Miguel Martinez, worked construction during the day and attended night classes to improve his English. Her mother, Rosa, cleaned offices in the downtown business district and took care of elderly Mrs. Johnson next door for extra money. This was the life Sarah presented to her classmates, teachers, and friends. What nobody knew was that Miguel Martinez was actually Miguel Herrera, one of the wealthiest men in Latin America. 20 years earlier, he had built a technology empire that spanned across multiple countries. His companies developed software solutions for major corporations, and his investments in renewable energy had made him billions. But success had come, with a price that Miguel never expected to pay. When Sarah was born, Miguel made a decision that would change their lives forever. He had watched too many wealthy families torn apart by kidnapping attempts, extortion, and children who grew up spoiled and disconnected from reality. He had seen business partners lose their children to drug cartels who targeted the wealthy. Miguel didn't want that life for his daughter, so the Herrera family became the Martinez family. They moved to a small American town where nobody would think to look for a billionaire. Miguel created an entirely new identity, complete with social security numbers, work history, and financial records. He hired the best security experts to help him disappear from his old life while maintaining control of his business empire through a complex network of trustees and managers. Sarah knew nothing about her father's real identity. To her, Miguel was simply a hard-working immigrant who wanted the best for his family. She watched him leave for construction jobs every morning, saw the dirt under his fingernails when he came home, and heard him practicing English pronunciation late into the night. She was proud of her parents for working so hard to give her opportunities they never had. At school, Sarah excelled academically but kept a low profile socially. She couldn't afford the designer clothes that popular students wore, couldn't go on expensive school trips, and worked part-time at the local grocery store to help her family make ends meet. Or so everyone thought. The truth was that Sarah worked at the grocery store because she wanted to understand what real work felt like. Miguel had arranged for her to have the job, believing it would teach her valuable lessons about responsibility and the value of money. What Sarah earned in a week, her father made in seconds from his investment portfolio. But she didn't know that. Her best friend Emma often felt sorry for Sarah's financial situation. Emma's family was middle class, and she sometimes offered to pay for Sarah's lunch or movie tickets. Sarah always politely declined, saying she couldn't accept charity. This only made Emma respect her more, but it also made Emma wish she could do something to help her friend's family. The other students at Roosevelt High had mixed reactions to Sarah. Some admired her work ethic and humble attitude. Others looked down on her because of her simple clothes and modest lifestyle. A few students, particularly those from wealthy families, sometimes made cruel comments about poor kids when they thought Sarah couldn't hear them. Sarah had learned to ignore these comments, but they still hurt. She often wondered what it would be like to have enough money to buy new clothes, to go on vacation with her family, or to attend college without worrying about student loans. She dreamed of one day becoming successful enough to help her parents, retire and live comfortably. What Sarah didn't realize was that her college education was already paid for, along with graduate school if she wanted it. Miguel had set up education funds that would cover everything from textbooks to living expenses. He had also established a trust fund that would make Sarah wealthy in her own right when she turned 25, but only if she had proven herself to be responsible and grounded. Miguel watched his daughter carefully, proud of the person she was becoming. Sarah was kind to everyone, regardless of their social status. She volunteered at the local food bank on weekends, helped elderly neighbors with their groceries, and tutored younger students who were struggling in math. She had developed genuine empathy and a strong work ethic, qualities that Miguel feared she might never have learned if she had grown up knowing about the family fortune. Rosa sometimes worried that they were being unfair to Sarah by keeping such a huge secret from her. She watched her daughter worry about money, save every penny from her part-time job, and stress about college applications because she thought they couldn't afford application fees. It broke Rosa's heart to see Sarah limiting her dreams because she believed her family was poor. But Miguel reminded Rosa of their original reasons for this deception. They had seen too many wealthy teenagers become entitled, lazy, and disconnected from the struggles of ordinary people. They had watched rich kids get into serious trouble because they never faced real consequences for their actions. Miguel wanted Sarah to understand the value of hard work, the importance of treating everyone with respect, and the satisfaction that comes from earning something through your own efforts. As Sarah's senior year of high school progressed, she began making plans for her future. She had been accepted to several colleges, but was planning to attend the local community college for 2 years to save money before transferring to a 4-year university. She had calculated exactly how many hours she would need to work at the grocery store to pay for tuition, books, and transportation. Sarah had no idea that her father's business managers were watching her college choices with great interest. They had been instructed to ensure that Sarah could attend any school she wanted, but to do so in a way that wouldn't reveal the family's true financial situation. Scholarships and grants would mysteriously become available. Financial aid packages would be unusually generous, and work-study opportunities would present themselves at exactly the right moments. The elaborate deception that had protected Sarah for 17 years was still holding strong, but cracks were beginning to show. As Sarah prepared for adulthood, the challenge of maintaining their secret identity would become increasingly difficult. The first crack in the Martinez family's carefully constructed facade appeared on a rainy Tuesday morning in March. Sarah was running late for school when she noticed a black SUV parked across the street from their apartment building. The vehicle had tinted windows and looked expensive, completely out of place in their modest neighborhood, where most residents drove older cars or took public transportation. She thought nothing of it initially, but when she returned from school that afternoon, the same SUV was still there. The next morning it was gone, but a different luxury car had taken its place. Sarah began to feel uneasy, though she couldn't explain why. Miguel had noticed the surveillance, too. His security team had warned him that some of his business rivals in South America were trying to locate him. After 20 years of successfully hiding his identity, someone was getting close to discovering the truth. Miguel knew he had to be more careful than ever, but he also realized that their time living as the Martinez family might be coming to an end. At school, Sarah was focused on her upcoming senior project presentation. She had chosen to research income inequality in America, interviewing families from different economic backgrounds about their daily struggles and dreams. The irony wasn't lost on Miguel when Sarah excitedly told him about her project over dinner. "I interviewed the Johnson family today," Sarah said, referring to their neighbors who lived in the apartment below them. "Mrs. Johnson works 3 jobs just to pay rent and buy medicine for her diabetes. It made me realize how lucky we are, even though we don't have much money either." Miguel nodded thoughtfully, stirring his coffee with a plastic spoon. He wanted to tell Sarah that he could solve Mrs. Johnson's financial problems with a single phone call, that he could pay for her medical treatment and ensure she never had to work 3 jobs again. But doing so would require explanations he wasn't ready to give. Rosa watched her husband's internal struggle and decided to act. The next day, while Sarah was at school and Miguel was at his construction job, Rosa visited Mrs. Johnson. She told the elderly woman that she had won a small lottery prize and wanted to share her good fortune. She handed Mrs. Johnson an envelope containing $5,000 in cash. Mrs. Johnson broke down in tears, clutching Rosa's hands and thanking her repeatedly. Rosa felt guilty about the lie, but she couldn't bear to watch their neighbors suffer when they had the means to help. She made Mrs. Johnson promise not to tell anyone about the money, claiming she didn't want other neighbors to become jealous or expect similar gifts. Meanwhile, at Roosevelt High School, Sarah was dealing with her own set of challenges. College acceptance letters were arriving, and her classmates were excitedly discussing their plans for fall. Emma had been accepted to an expensive private university and was thrilled about the opportunity to study abroad during her junior year. "I wish you could come with me," Emma told Sarah during lunch. "But I know your family can't afford the tuition. Maybe you could apply for financial aid." Sarah smiled sadly, explaining that she had already looked into financial aid options and determined that she would need to start at community college. She didn't mention that she had been accepted to several prestigious universities, including Emma's first choice school. The acceptance letters were hidden in her bedroom drawer because she knew her family couldn't afford the tuition, and she didn't want to burden her parents with guilt about something beyond their control. What Sarah didn't know was that Miguel's business managers had been working behind the scenes to ensure her path to higher education would be smooth. They had created several scholarship programs specifically designed to help students with Sarah's academic profile and background. The scholarships had been established at universities across the country, funded by anonymous donors who were actually Miguel's various business entities. Dr. Patricia Williams, the guidance counselor at Roosevelt High, called Sarah into her office on a Friday afternoon. Sarah assumed she was in trouble for something, but Dr. Williams had surprising news. "Sarah, I've received some interesting information about scholarship opportunities that might be perfect for you," Dr. Williams said, spreading several documents across her desk. "There are 3 full-ride scholarships available for students. With your academic record and background, the application deadlines have been extended, and the selection committees are specifically looking for students who demonstrate strong work ethic and community involvement." Sarah stared at the scholarship applications in disbelief. The opportunities seemed too good to be true, but Dr. Williams assured her that everything was legitimate. The scholarships would cover tuition, room and board, books, and even provide a monthly stipend for personal expenses. "I don't understand," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "These scholarships weren't available when I applied to colleges earlier this year." Dr. Williams explained that the donors had recently decided to expand their programs and were actively seeking qualified candidates. She encouraged Sarah to apply immediately, emphasizing that her chances of receiving at least one of the scholarships were excellent. That evening, Sarah raced home to share the news with her parents. She found Miguel and Rosa sitting at their small kitchen table, looking through bills and budgeting for the upcoming month. Sarah's excitement was infectious as she spread the scholarship applications across the table, explaining the opportunities that had suddenly become available. Miguel's heart raced as he examined the documents. He recognized the legal language and formatting used by his business attorneys. His managers had done excellent work creating these scholarship programs, making them appear completely legitimate and unconnected to the Herrera fortune. "This is wonderful news, mija," Miguel said, using the Spanish term of endearment that always made Sarah smile. "You deserve these opportunities because of your hard work and dedication." Rosa squeezed Sarah's hand, fighting back tears of relief and pride. She had been losing sleep worrying about how to handle Sarah's college education without revealing their secret. Now, Miguel's team had found a way to provide for their daughter while maintaining their cover story. Sarah spent the entire weekend working on scholarship applications. She wrote essays about overcoming financial hardship, described her experiences working at the grocery store, and explained how she planned to use her education to help other families in similar situations. Every word she wrote was heartfelt and genuine, based on what she believed to be her family's real circumstances. On Monday morning, Sarah submitted her applications and began the anxious wait for responses. She continued working at the grocery store, saving every penny for college expenses that she didn't realize were already covered. Her manager, Mr. Peterson, noticed that Sarah seemed more hopeful and energetic than usual. "You're glowing lately." "Sarah," Mr. Peterson commented as they restocked the produce section together. "Something good happening in your life?" Sarah told him about the scholarship opportunities, and Mr. Peterson's face lit up with genuine happiness for her. He had grown fond of Sarah over the months she had worked for him, impressed by her reliability and positive attitude, even when dealing with difficult customers. What Mr. Peterson didn't know was that Miguel owned the grocery store chain where Sarah worked. Miguel had purchased it quietly through one of his investment companies, partly to provide Sarah with a realistic work experience, and partly to ensure she was in a safe, controlled environment. Miguel had instructed the management team to treat Sarah exactly like any other employee, never showing favoritism or making her job easier than it should be. As the weeks passed, Sarah threw herself into her schoolwork and her job, trying to stay busy while waiting for scholarship results. She had no idea that the selection committees had already made their decisions, or that Miguel's security team was working overtime to protect the family from increasingly sophisticated attempts to uncover their true identity. The black SUVs and luxury cars continued to appear sporadically in their neighborhood, and Miguel knew that their carefully constructed life as the Martinez family was living on borrowed time. The phone call that would change everything came on a Thursday evening in April. Sarah was in her bedroom studying for final exams when she heard her father's voice suddenly shift from casual conversation to urgent whispers in rapid Spanish. She had heard Miguel speak in his native language many times before, but never with such intensity and concern. Rosa quickly joined Miguel in the kitchen, and Sarah could hear them having a heated discussion in hushed tones. She tried to focus on her chemistry homework, but the worried voices of her parents made concentration impossible. After 20 minutes, the apartment fell silent, and Sarah heard her father making several more phone calls in Spanish. Miguel was talking to his head of security, a man named Carlos, who had been protecting the Herrera family for over 15 years. Carlos had disturbing news. A private investigator hired by one of Miguel's former business associates had tracked down several leads pointing to their location. The investigator hadn't found them yet, but he was getting dangerously close. "We may need to relocate again," Carlos warned Miguel. "The investigator has connected your construction job to the Martinez identity. He's been asking questions around town about a Mexican man who speaks Spanish with an educated accent." Miguel felt his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. They had lived peacefully as the Martinez family for almost 18 years. Sarah had grown up in this town, made friends, and was just months away from graduating high school. Moving now would devastate her, especially when she was so close to starting college. "Give me more time," Miguel told Carlos. "Sarah's graduation is in 6 weeks. If we can just hold on until then, she can start college somewhere far from here, and we can disappear again." But Carlos had more bad news. The investigator wasn't working alone. He had been hired by Eduardo Vega, a ruthless businessman who had been one of Miguel's competitors in South America. Vega had never forgiven Miguel for outbidding him on several major contracts 20 years earlier, and he had been searching for Miguel ever since. "Vega doesn't just want to find you," Carlos explained. "He wants revenge. If he discovers Sarah's existence, he might try to use her against you." Miguel's blood ran cold. He had always known this day might come, but he had hoped they could maintain their secret identity until Sarah was old enough to protect herself. Now, with his daughter just 17 and completely unaware of the danger surrounding her, Miguel had to make some impossible decisions. The next morning, Sarah noticed that her parents seemed distracted and worried. Miguel kept checking his phone, and Rosa jumped every time a car door slammed outside their apartment building. When Sarah asked if everything was okay, they assured her that they were just stressed about work and bills. At school, Sarah received the news she had been hoping for since submitting her scholarship applications. Dr. Williams called her into the guidance office with a huge smile on her face. "Sarah, I have incredible news," Dr. Williams announced, holding up 3 official letters. "You've been awarded full scholarships to all 3 universities you applied to. You can choose whichever school you prefer, and everything will be paid." 4. Sarah stared at the letters in shock. She had hoped to receive one scholarship, but winning all 3 seemed impossible. The letters were from prestigious universities in different states, each offering complete financial packages that would cover every expense for 4 years. "I can't believe this is real," Sarah whispered, her hands shaking as she held the acceptance letters. Dr. Williams explained that the scholarship selection committees had been extremely impressed with Sarah's academic record, her work experience, and her community service. They particularly liked her essays about overcoming financial hardship and her plans to help other families in need. Sarah couldn't wait to share the news with her parents, but when she arrived home that afternoon, she found Miguel packing a suitcase in their bedroom. Rosa was in the kitchen, wrapping dishes in newspaper and placing them in boxes. "What's going on?" Sarah asked, confusion and fear creeping into her voice. Miguel and Rosa exchanged glances, both struggling with how much to tell their daughter. They had rehearsed this conversation many times over the years, but they had always hoped they would never need to have it. "We need to move, mija," Miguel said, sitting down on the bed and patting the space next to him for Sarah to join him. "There are some problems with my work situation, and we need to relocate quickly." Sarah felt her world tilting. She had just received full scholarships to attend college, and now her family was being forced to move again. They had moved several times when she was younger, but Sarah had assumed those moves were related to her father finding better job opportunities. "But what about graduation?" Sarah asked, tears forming in her eyes. "What about my scholarship? What about Emma and my other friends?" Rosa sat down on Sarah's other side, wrapping her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "You can still go to college, Sarah. These scholarships will work at any of the universities that accepted you, even if we're living in a different state." Miguel knew he couldn't tell Sarah the complete truth, but he needed to prepare her for the possibility that their lives might change dramatically and quickly. He chose his words carefully, trying to provide enough information to keep her safe without revealing the family's real identity. "Sarah, there are some people who might want to cause problems for our family," Miguel explained. "I can't give you all the details, but we may need to change our names and move to a place where these people can't find us." Sarah stared at her father in confusion. The idea that someone would want to hurt their family seemed impossible. They were just ordinary people trying to make an honest living. What could her construction worker father have done to make enemies? "I don't understand, Papa," Sarah said, using the childhood name for her father that she only used when she was scared or upset. "What kind of problems? What people?" Miguel struggled with how much to reveal. Sarah deserved to know that she might be in danger, but he also wanted to protect her from the fear and anxiety that would come with knowing the truth about their situation. "Some people from my past in Mexico are trying to find me," Miguel said. Finally, "It's complicated, but we may need to disappear for a while until things settle down." Rosa watched Sarah process this information, seeing the confusion and fear in her daughter's eyes. Sarah had no context for understanding why anyone would be looking for her father or why the family would need to disappear. In her mind, Miguel was just a hard-working immigrant who had never caused trouble for anyone. "Are we in danger?" Sarah asked quietly. Miguel wanted to reassure his daughter, but he also needed her to understand the seriousness of their situation. "We might be," he admitted. "That's why we need to be very careful and be ready to leave quickly if necessary." Sarah felt as though she was living in a movie or a dream. Just hours earlier, her biggest worry had been choosing between 3 full scholarship offers. Now, her family was talking about changing their names and disappearing from people who wanted to hurt them. "What about Mrs. Johnson?" Sarah asked, thinking of their elderly neighbor who had become like a grandmother to her. "What about my job at the grocery store? What about Emma?" Miguel's heart broke as he watched his daughter grapple with the possibility of losing everything familiar in her life. He had tried so hard to give Sarah a normal childhood, but now their past was catching up with them in ways that would force Sarah to grow up much faster than he had wanted. "We'll figure out how to handle everything," Miguel promised, though he wasn't sure how he could keep that promise. "Right now, I need you to pack a bag with your most important belongings, just in case we need to leave suddenly." As Sarah slowly walked to her closet and began choosing items to pack, Miguel stepped into the hallway and called Carlos again. The situation was deteriorating faster than anyone had anticipated, and Miguel knew that their time as the Martinez family was running out. The crisis reached its breaking point on a sunny Saturday morning in May, just 3 weeks before Sarah's high school graduation. Sarah was working her usual weekend shift at the grocery store when Emma burst through the automatic doors, her face flushed with excitement and confusion. "Sarah, you have to come outside right now," Emma said breathlessly, grabbing her friend's arm. "There are reporters in the parking lot asking questions about you and your family." Sarah felt her stomach drop. She followed Emma outside, where she saw 2 news vans with satellite dishes and several people with cameras and microphones. A well-dressed woman with perfectly styled hair was speaking into a camera while gesturing toward the grocery store. "We're here in Roosevelt investigating reports that Miguel Herrera, the missing billionaire tech mogul from South America, has been living in this small American town under the assumed identity of Miguel Martinez," the reporter was saying. "Sources suggest that Herrera has been working construction jobs while secretly maintaining control of his multi-billion-dollar business empire." Sarah grabbed Emma's hand, her legs suddenly feeling weak. The words she was hearing didn't make sense. Her father was Miguel Martinez, a construction worker who barely made enough money to pay rent. There had to be some mistake. "That's not your dad they're talking about, right?" Emma asked, but her voice carried uncertainty. "I mean, your last name is Martinez, not Herrera." Before Sarah could respond, she saw her father's pickup truck speeding into the parking lot. Miguel jumped out of the vehicle and ran toward the store, his face showing more fear than Sarah had ever seen. He spotted the reporters and immediately changed direction, heading straight for Sarah. "We need to leave now," Miguel said urgently, grabbing Sarah's arm. "Don't talk to anyone, don't answer any questions, just come with me." The reporters noticed Miguel's arrival and began moving toward them with their cameras rolling. Sarah heard someone shout, "Mr. Herrera, can you confirm your identity? How long have you been living in Roosevelt under false documents?" Miguel pulled Sarah toward his truck, but the reporters were faster. Suddenly, Sarah found herself surrounded by microphones and cameras, with strangers asking her questions she couldn't understand. "Miss Herrera, did you know about your father's real identity? How does it feel to discover you're the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in Latin America?" Sarah looked at her father in shock and confusion. The reporters were calling her Miss Herrera and talking about wealth and false identities. Miguel's face had gone completely pale, and she could see panic in his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah said to the reporters. "My name is Sarah Martinez, and my father works construction. You have the wrong people." But even as she said the words, Sarah was beginning to notice things that didn't add up. Miguel's hands were soft for a construction worker, without the permanent calluses and scars she would expect. His Spanish accent sometimes disappeared completely, when he was concentrating on something else. And now that she thought about it, he seemed to know a lot about business and technology, for someone who supposedly had only basic education. Miguel managed to push through the crowd of reporters and get Sarah into the truck. As they drove away, Sarah could see the news crews following them in their vans. Miguel was driving faster than usual, taking turns that would make it difficult for the vehicles behind them to keep up. "Papa, what is happening?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "Who are those people? Why are they calling you by a different name?" Miguel's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he navigated through residential streets, checking his rearview mirror constantly. He had hoped to have more time to prepare Sarah for this moment, but Eduardo Vega's investigator had found them, and now everything was falling apart. "Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Miguel said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Those reporters are partially right. My real name is Miguel Herrera, and I used to run technology companies in South America." Sarah stared at her father as though she was seeing him for the first time. "What do you mean, used to run? What technology companies?" Miguel pulled into an empty parking lot behind an abandoned warehouse and turned off the engine. He knew they only had a few minutes before the reporters found them again, but Sarah deserved to understand what was happening to her life. "I built several companies that became very successful," Miguel explained. "By the time you were born, those companies were worth billions of dollars. But success brought dangers I hadn't expected. Competitors who wanted to destroy me, criminals who wanted to kidnap family members for ransom, and business associates who became enemies." Sarah felt as though she was hearing about someone else's life. Her father, the man who worried about paying rent and bought groceries with coupons, was talking about billion-dollar companies and kidnapping threats. "So we're not really poor?" Sarah asked quietly. Miguel shook his head. "We've never been poor, mija. I've been maintaining control of my companies through managers and lawyers while we lived as the Martinez family. I wanted you to grow up understanding the value of hard work and treating everyone with respect, regardless of their social status." The pieces of Sarah's life began rearranging themselves in her mind. The mysterious scholarships that had seemed too good to be true. The times when her parents had seemed to know more about world events and business than their education should have allowed. The way Miguel sometimes used words and phrases that seemed too sophisticated for a construction worker. "So the apartment, your job, Mom's cleaning work, all of it was fake?" Sarah asked, anger beginning to mix with her confusion. "The apartment and jobs were real," Miguel said. "I actually did construction work, and your mother really did clean offices. We wanted to experience what life was like for ordinary families. But we were never struggling financially the way we pretended to be." Sarah thought about all the times she had worried about money, all the nights she had stayed awake calculating how to pay for college, all the occasions when she had declined invitations from friends because she thought her family couldn't afford them. "How could you lie to me about everything?" Sarah asked, tears streaming down her face. "I've been working at the grocery store, saving every penny, worrying about college costs, and you've been a billionaire this whole time?" Before Miguel could respond, Rosa's voice came through his cell phone, which was connected to the truck's speaker system. "Miguel, you need to get Sarah and come home right now. There are reporters surrounding our building, and Carlos says Eduardo Vega's people are already in town." Miguel started the engine immediately. "We're coming, Rosa. Pack only what we can. Carry in 10 minutes. We're leaving Roosevelt today." Sarah listened to this conversation in stunned silence. Her life was disintegrating before her eyes, and she was discovering that nothing she had believed about her family was true. The reporters following them, the mention of dangerous people coming to town, and her parents' obvious fear made it clear that their situation was serious. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked as Miguel drove toward their apartment building. "I don't know yet," Miguel admitted. "Carlos is arranging for us to disappear again, but it might take some time to establish new identities and find a safe place to live." Sarah realized that she might never see Emma again, never walk across the stage at graduation, never attend college with her scholarships. The life she had planned for herself was evaporating, replaced by a reality she couldn't have imagined as They approached their apartment building. Sarah could see the crowd of reporters and photographers waiting for them. News vans lined the street, and neighbors were standing on their balconies watching the commotion. Mrs. Johnson was visible in her window, looking confused and worried. "Sarah," Miguel said as he parked behind the building, "I know this is overwhelming, and I know you're angry with me for keeping this secret. But everything I did was to protect you and give you a chance to become the person you are today. Can you trust me just a little longer while we figure out how to keep you safe?" Sarah looked at her father, seeing him clearly for the first time in her life. He wasn't the struggling construction worker she had grown up with, but he also wasn't a stranger. He was still the man who had taught her to ride a bicycle, who had helped her with homework every night, and who had shown her how to treat people with kindness and respect. "I'll trust you," Sarah said finally. "But when we get to wherever we're going, I want to know everything. No more lies, no more secrets." Miguel nodded, knowing that their relationship would never be the same, but hoping that honesty might help them build something stronger than the foundation of deception they were leaving behind. The safe house was located in a remote area of Montana, surrounded by mountains and accessible only by a winding dirt road. Sarah had never seen anything like it during their 18 years of living as the Martinez family. The house was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, and technology that seemed decades ahead of anything she had experienced. Carlos, her father's head of security, met them at the door. He was a tall, serious man in his 50s who spoke with authority and treated Miguel with obvious respect. Sarah realized that Carlos had been watching over their family for years without her knowledge, maintaining their safety from a distance. "The Vega situation is worse than we anticipated," Carlos reported as they settled into the house's main living area. "He's not just looking for you anymore, Miguel. He's actively trying to destroy your business empire and eliminate anyone connected to your family." Sarah listened to this conversation with growing amazement and fear. Her father's business empire, which she was still trying to understand, was apparently under attack by someone who wanted to hurt their family. The comfortable life they had built in Roosevelt seemed like a distant memory. "Show me the financial reports," Miguel said, and Carlos handed him a tablet computer that displayed complex charts and numbers. Sarah watched her father analyze the information with expertise that revealed his true background. This wasn't a construction worker looking at confusing business documents. This was a brilliant entrepreneur who understood exactly what he was seeing. Rosa sat down next to Sarah on the leather couch, taking her daughter's hand gently. "I know this is all very confusing and frightening," Rosa said. "Would you like me to explain some things while your father handles business matters?" Sarah nodded, grateful for any information that might help her understand what was happening to her life. Rosa began telling the story of how she and Miguel had met in Mexico City when they were both young college students. Miguel had been studying computer science and business, while Rosa was pursuing a degree in international relations. "Your father was already starting his first company when we got married," Rosa explained. "He was incredibly smart and hardworking, but also very lucky. His software solutions became popular with major corporations, and his business grew faster than anyone expected." Sarah learned that her parents had been wealthy for most of their marriage, but that success had brought unexpected problems. Competitors had tried to steal Miguel's business secrets. Criminals had attempted to kidnap Rosa for ransom, and corrupt government officials had demanded bribes in exchange for operating permits. "When I became pregnant with you, we decided that we wanted a different kind of life," Rosa continued. "Miguel arranged for trusted managers to run his companies while we disappeared. We wanted you to grow up safe and normal, without the pressures and dangers that come with extreme wealth." As Rosa talked, Sarah began to understand the sacrifices her parents had made for her safety and character development. They had given up mansions, luxury cars, expensive vacations, and social status to live in a small apartment and work ordinary jobs. They had done this not because they had to, but because they believed it was best for their daughter. Miguel finished his business call and joined the conversation. "Sarah, I need you to understand that our situation is still dangerous," he said. "Eduardo Vega has been tracking us for months, and now that he knows our location in Roosevelt, he'll be looking for our new hiding place." Carlos spread several photographs across the coffee table, showing Sarah images of a man in his 60s with... 6 months later, Sarah stood at the window of a penthouse apartment in Seattle, watching the morning sun reflect off the waters of Puget Sound. The view was breathtaking, but she found herself missing the simple charm of Roosevelt's main street, and the familiar sound of her neighbors starting their day. Carlos had been right about Eduardo Vega's legal troubles. The investigation into his search for the Herrera family had uncovered decades of criminal activity, including tax evasion, bribery, and connections to organized crime. Vega was now serving a 15-year prison sentence in Brazil, and his business empire had collapsed under the weight of legal proceedings and frozen assets. The immediate danger to Sarah's family had passed, but returning to their old life as the Martinez family was impossible. Too many people knew their true identity, and media attention had made Miguel one of the most recognizable faces in the business world. They had been forced to live as the wealthy Herrera family, complete with security details, luxury accommodations, and public scrutiny. Sarah had initially struggled with this transition. After years of living modestly, the sudden access to unlimited resources felt overwhelming and somehow wrong. She missed the satisfaction of earning her own money, the simplicity of making decisions based on what she could afford, and the authenticity of relationships that weren't complicated by wealth. Her first major decision as a known billionaire heiress had been about college. The prestigious universities that had offered her scholarships were now competing aggressively for her enrollment, offering special programs, research opportunities, and naming rights to buildings. Sarah had rejected all of these offers, choosing instead to attend a small liberal arts college in Oregon where she could study environmental science without fanfare. Emma had been the hardest friendship to navigate in this new reality. When Sarah finally contacted her former best friend, Emma's reaction had been a mixture of hurt, confusion, and awe. Emma felt betrayed by years of deception, but she was also struggling to understand how her friend, who had worked at a grocery store, was suddenly one of the wealthiest teenagers in America. "I keep thinking about all the times I felt sorry for you," Emma had said during their emotional reunion. "All the times I wanted to pay for your lunch or movie tickets because I thought your family was struggling. I feel so stupid." Sarah had tried to explain that her family's financial struggles had been real in an emotional sense, even if they weren't real economically. "I really did worry about money because I believed we didn't have any," Sarah had said. "My feelings and experiences were genuine even if the circumstances weren't what I thought they were." Their friendship had survived, but it required constant navigation around the wealth gap that now defined their relationship. Emma was attending a state university on student loans, while Sarah could have bought the entire campus without affecting her inheritance. Every interaction required careful consideration to avoid making Emma feel uncomfortable or inferior. Miguel had thrown himself back into running his business empire, but with a new perspective shaped by their years living as an ordinary family. He had restructured his companies to focus more heavily on social impact, environmental sustainability, and employee welfare. The Herrera Technology Group now offered extensive benefits, profit-sharing programs, and educational opportunities for all workers, from entry-level positions to executive roles. "Living as Miguel Martinez taught me things about leadership that I never understood when I was wealthy," Miguel explained to Sarah as they toured one of his manufacturing facilities. "I learned what it feels like to worry about job security, to calculate whether you can afford groceries at the end of the month, and to be treated differently because of your social status." Sarah watched her father interact with employees at every level of the company, noting how comfortable he seemed talking with janitors, assembly line workers, and executive assistants. His years working construction had given him credibility with working-class employees that most billionaire CEOs could never achieve. Rosa had also found new purpose in their revealed identity. She had established the Rosa Herrera Foundation, which focused on supporting immigrant families, elderly care, and educational opportunities for low-income students. The foundation operated programs in communities like Roosevelt, helping families who were facing the same challenges the Martinez family had pretended to face. "I want to help people like Mrs. Johnson," Rosa had explained when announcing the foundation's mission. "People who work multiple jobs just to survive, who worry about medical bills, and who sacrifice their own dreams to provide for their families." Sarah had been invited to join the foundation's board of directors, but she had declined, preferring to work on environmental projects through her college's research programs. She was using her inheritance to fund climate change research, renewable energy development, and conservation efforts, but she was doing so quietly, without seeking publicity or recognition. The most difficult aspect of their new life was the constant media attention. Sarah's story had captured public imagination as a real-life fairy tale about a girl who discovered she was secretly a princess. Reporters followed her to college, photographed her at coffee shops, and speculated about her romantic relationships. The privacy that had defined her first 17 years of life was completely gone. "I understand now why you wanted to hide from this world," Sarah told her father as they walked through their Seattle apartment, which was equipped with bulletproof windows and monitored by security cameras. "The money is nice, but the freedom we had as the Martinez family was more valuable than any inheritance." Miguel nodded, understanding his daughter's struggle. "We can't go back to being the Martinez family, but we can try to use our resources and influence to help other families live the kind of life we pretended to have." Sarah's college experience had been transformative in unexpected ways. Studying environmental science had connected her to professors and students who were passionate about solving global problems, and she had found purpose in using her wealth to support their research projects. She had also met David, a graduate student who was working on sustainable agriculture techniques and who treated her like an ordinary classmate rather than a celebrity heiress. "David didn't even know who I was when we first met," Sarah told Rosa during one of their weekly phone calls. "He asked me out because he liked talking to me about soil conservation techniques, not because he wanted access to my money." Sarah's relationship with David had become serious over the course of her sophomore year, and he had proven his authenticity by continuing to split dinner bills and pay for his own expenses even after learning about her wealth. He had also introduced Sarah to his family, working-class farmers in Iowa, who treated her with the same warmth and respect they showed to any of David's girlfriends. As Sarah approached her 20th birthday, she began making plans for how to use her inheritance when she gained full access to it at 25. She wanted to create programs that would help families like the ones she had grown up believing she belonged to. She envisioned scholarship funds for first-generation college students, small business loans for immigrant entrepreneurs, and healthcare assistance programs for elderly people. "I want to give other families the security that we always had but didn't know we had," Sarah explained to Miguel as they discussed her philanthropic goals. "I want to help people achieve the American dream that we were pretending to pursue." Miguel was proud of the woman his daughter had become, but he also worried about the weight of responsibility she was placing on herself. Sarah had inherited not just his wealth, but also his drive to use that wealth for positive change in the world. The Roosevelt community had never fully recovered from the media circus that had surrounded the Herrera family's exposure. The small town had become a tourist destination for people curious about where a billionaire had hidden for 18 years. Local businesses had benefited from increased tourism, but longtime residents complained about the loss of privacy and community character. Mrs. Johnson had become something of a local celebrity, frequently interviewed by reporters about her friendship with the family she had known as the Martinez. She always spoke kindly about Sarah and her parents, describing them as the most generous and hard-working neighbors she had ever known. Money didn't change who they were inside, Mrs. Johnson had told one interviewer. "Sarah was always a sweet girl who helped with my groceries, and Miguel was always a man who treated everyone with respect. The only difference is that now they can help people on a much bigger scale." As Sarah looked out at the Seattle skyline, she reflected on the journey that had brought her family from their hidden life in Roosevelt to their current existence as public figures and philanthropists. The transition had been difficult and sometimes painful, but it had also revealed possibilities for making a positive impact that she never could have imagined as a grocery store clerk worried about college tuition. She still missed the simplicity of her old life, the authenticity of relationships uncomplicated by wealth, and the satisfaction of earning her own way in the world. But she had also gained an understanding of how privilege could be used responsibly, how wealth could solve problems that seemed insurmountable to ordinary families.